Tony in Australia.
Hey, g'day guys. How you going?
Hello. Hello.
Hey. I got I guess two questions and I guess a comment. Mainly my point for calling was I was watching an episode on Jesus Loves a Captive Audience or something like that.
Sounds like a Don topic.
Yeah, and I just wanted to share a personal experience and sort of how I became Christian, and I'm not a Christian anymore, I'm an atheist. But I went to jail a few years ago now, for 2 years. It's a long story, but essentially I tried to rob an armored car, which was a really dumb thing to do.
Yeah, don't do that.
No. Really messes with your life. Anyway, through my experience in jail, I wasn't really, I was raised Catholic, but I wasn't practicing. Didn't really factor into my life decisions or whatever I thought or did. But when I was in jail, it became very big because it was just, if anything, nice to sort of get away from general population to sort of converse and talk with sort of, I guess, normal people that come in from the outside
Sure.
to visit prison and whatnot. And it was, I became, I guess, not a, what would you call them? I just became sort of Christian without any labels, Christian. And then when I left jail, I kept on going to what's the word, Pentecostally sort of churches, and not really knowing, I guess, why I believed what I believed, and just sort of hoping that the Holy Spirit would come into me and all that sort of stuff.
Would you say, I mean, a lot of people claim that converting to Christianity makes you less likely to commit those crimes. Would you say that happened in your case or not?
No, I don't think so. I feel like...
I guess you'd say maybe you just did some growing up anyway, or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. You have time to reflect. I honestly just felt shitty about what I did, you know, like I just felt guilty about what I put my family through and friends through and what I, you know, did to myself, and my future careers and, you know, time wasted and, but I was just curious if there's, what your opinion on that is, and if Christianity is very prevalent in jails in America and or prison correctional systems. And
yeah. I mean, it is. It's very prevalent, and there are cases that pop up every now and then with regard to sentencing, for example, where somebody might get sentenced to a program, and it's like some kind of inherently religious program for, you know, either addiction or rehabilitation of some sort. And they can often successfully sue and say, hey, I want to go through a secular program. I don't want to go through this religious program. There have also been lawsuits where...
Or like AA.
Yeah, and there. Well, I don't know that AA is like strictly Christian. It's got the higher power angle. So I don't know really how AA is interpreted, but there are certainly, you know, treatment programs and also sort of, I guess... like charitable programs a person can be told that they have to work with or go through in order to pay back to society. And when this is religious, they can sometimes appeal to get something that's not religious. And also there were some cases within prisons where people were only allowed to do the kind of socializing you described with religious visits and groups. And so there have been suits where people went forward and said that they would like to have a secular option, and sometimes those have been successful. Where atheism has been protected. I think the phrasing is something like protected as a religion. So it's not that atheism is a religion, but it is that it deserves all of the same protections that go under the First Amendment religious protections.
Okay. Anyway.
There were also... you know, there was Chuck Colson's prison ministry, which I believe is still going on today, which would claim that, you know, you minister to people in prison and then you get them to stick to the program after they leave, and it reduces their rate of recommitting crimes that would get them put back in jail. There were huge problems with that, with those claims, which I don't think I'll go into right now, but...
There's also the issue of people, I've also heard concerns about people maybe going into these programs in order to look good for an appeals board or to look good for a probationary board. It just sort of looks good because religion gets that sort of automatic respect, whether it's really useful or not.
Yeah, I don't know. When it came down to sentencing, all that stuff was brought up to me. I don't think it made a damn difference at all.
Maybe not.
Okay. But people think that it will, and that's sometimes enough.
Yeah. Anyway, through going to jail, I became, I guess, a stronger Christian, and I essentially I just feel lied to, and like my time was wasted even more. I could have been reading better books, I guess. In there. Anyway, off that topic, just quickly, I got a sort of argument issue with a co-worker, and she's a Pentecostal Christian, goes to one of those rock band churches, and really nice girl, and in fact she's amazing, but she really does believe everything literal in the Bible.
Okay.
And she talks about the New Covenant, as I brought up some Old Testament stuff, and I've even brought up some of the immorality of the Beatitudes, stuff that Matt goes on about, and she says, but that doesn't matter because it's the New Covenant.
I'm going to give you a link that you can look up, and this will probably tell you what you need to know. At ironchariots.org, which is a wiki that Matt and I set up to kind of be a repository for counter-arguments. Search for, I think it's But That's the Old Testament. And there's an article on that which will include a number of responses that you can make to that line of reasoning. Like one of them is, the Ten Commandments is also the Old Testament, so is that no longer valid? But anyway, check that out, ironchariots.org, But That's the Old Testament.
Yeah, let me just pull out too. There's a whole lot of confusion regarding the law and what aspects of the law carried forward, didn't carry forward, what's still in, you can get bogged down in that in a big way. In general, that old law applied to the Hebrews only. Whether or not it was still applicable to the Hebrew Christians, they can argue about that. I think that there are verses that make it clear that it was still applicable to them. I think Acts 15 and Acts 22 make it pretty clear that Paul endorsed keeping the old laws in Jewish Christian homes. And I think that he endorsed keeping the old law in regards to raising their children under the law. He also appealed to have the non-Jews who were becoming Christians adhere to laws on diet and laws on sexual morality. So he included old law restrictions even on the non-Jews who were joining the church. Now, there's other verses that seem to negate that. Big surprise, right? The Bible's got verses that conflict.
Yeah, who would have thought?
So if you go down that path, you're going to get counter verses, and you're going to get into this rabbit hole of apologetics where people are trying to make these things that conflict make sense and work together, and so it's going to get really hairy really fast. The best thing I can recommend is that you simply point out that, okay, God gave this law to the Jews, correct? I mean, at least she believes that. Whether it's in effect today or not, he gave this law to the Jews. God thought this law was a good idea. And Jesus says that the law was a good idea, even if she thinks that Jesus ultimately, made it obsolete. He still praised it. So Jesus praised that law. God gave a group of people that law, and so it's fair to say, do you think God was right in giving that law to people? Is that the kind of law you would give to somebody, to stone people to death and kill witches and kill people for sex, and really this is a law that you support as like a good and decent thing to do to other human beings? It's like Sharia law. It's like basically saying God gave Sharia law to this group of people, and I'm okay with that. It's like, really? You're okay with that? Because that's brutal.
Yeah. She has argued that, but it's not about the law anymore. It's about the personal relationship sort of things with Jesus.
It doesn't matter. The thing is, even if she believes that, the point is, do you believe that this law was given to people by God? And if so, how do you defend that your God was decent in doing that?
Yeah, hold the point. Yeah. No worries. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Joe. I really appreciate it. Big fan. And
Sure.
also, just quickly, when are you or one of your delegates going to come to Australia, or have you already been involved and I missed you?
I don't know if we're
What?
even allowed to talk about this.
Well, I mean, I'm a registered member of the Secular Student Alliance speakers and also with Samara Lectures. So if you've got a local student group or atheist group or anything, you can feel free to float my name to them.
Yeah. You never know who might show up in Australia.
Well, if you ever go on holidays, guys, definitely check out Brisbane, because Sydney and Melbourne are popular. Brisbane's a cool city. Anyway.
Okay.
No worries, guys. No, thank you for your time.
Sure,
Thanks for
thank
calling.
you.
Right. No, it's bye.